Chapter 365. The Devildom 6. The Demon King of Fury. He had created a savage frenzy in the world true to his name. He had obsessed over playing family with those who did not share even a single drop of blood with him, and he even sacrificed himself for his children in the end. But if viewed from a different angle, perhaps he had acted as such because he was crazy. Didn't you all experience it earlier? The magic of Iris, the new Demon King of Fury's power. Didn't you all feel just how much it shakes the mind? Eugene uttered. Their surroundings were still filled with the encroaching darkness, the putrid stench of rotting corpses, and the shrieking noise of flying insects. The sea of blood itself was giving off a rancid smell as well. The dark power of the Demon King of Fury can drive people insane. In severe cases, it'll even make you incapable of differentiating friend from foe. You will end up stabbing allies in the back or worse, even slitting your own throats, Eugene continued, the gravity of his words sinking deep into those present on the fleet. Ivic's eyebrows twitched slightly after hearing Eugene's words. He stole a glance at Ortis, and in that fleeting moment, Ortis turned his gaze towards Ivic as well. Surprised at the unintended sudden eye contact, they both shot each other a stern look before turning away with a scoff. After laying out the problems, Eugene's words turned hopeful. Well, if we brace ourselves mentally in advance, it is possible to resist this corrosive power. Thankfully, we also have the saint with us this time, Eugene said before turning his head to emphasize his point. Christina was with a group of people in the distance and was deeply engrossed in a conversation with them. The number of wizards mobilized for the subjugation of Pirate Empress Iris was not large enough. There was Maze Briar, commander of Shimuan's court wizards and an archwizard of the 8th Circle, as well as about 20 battle wizards belonging to the Slad mercenaries. But in contrast, the expeditionary force included a considerable number of those clergy belonging to the church. The Holy Empire of Uras wasn't the only place worshipping the God of Light. The God of Light was a deity with the largest following on the continent, with its faith even spreading all the way to Shimuan. As such, the Cathedral of Light of Shimuan had dispatched priests and paladins for this subjugation expedition. In addition, another deity, the God of Knights and Honor, held as much repute as the God of Light in Shimuan. Ranked third in the gladiator rankings was Paladin Adol, a self-proclaimed grand warrior of the God of Knights and Honor. He was also seen lending an ear to Christina's words. Surrounding Paladin Adol were dozens of priests who also served the God of Knights and Honor. The fact that they worshipped different gods and had different faiths did not matter at this juncture. Though these clergy would usually refer to each other as heretics and maintain a distance from each other, in the face of a battle against a real demon king, they had no choice but to unite despite their different beliefs. Earlier, the light that Christina had conjured, the magnificent divine power seemingly not of human origin, and the display of 8 large, beautiful wings and summoned angels was a spectacle so holy that even the believers of different faiths had to acknowledge it. It went without saying that the followers of the God of Light were greatly affected by seeing their saint in action. Some could not even wipe away the tear streaks left behind on their cheeks as they listened to Christina's words intently. For them, Christina's words were almost like words from their God. So, what were priests supposed to do in the battle against the Demon King? Fortunately, all the priests dispatched for this punitive subjugation expedition were battle priests. They possessed adequate knowledge on combating demons, though unfortunately they lacked combat experience, having been born in an era of peace devoid of wars and conflicts. In terms of experience, they hadn't even fought demonic beasts, let alone the demon folk. Their battle experience was limited to hunting down deranged black wizards, nothing more. In this age of relative calm, the main adversaries of combat priests and paladins were human-created heresies or monsters. Hence, determining what they should do in the battle against the Demon King was a crucial but difficult question, their knowledge being limited to just theories learned from textbooks. Thankfully, that wasn't a problem in this war. Inside Christina resided Anise, the only saint in this era with actual combat experience against the Demon Kings. Facing the Demon King of Fury who, just like 300 years ago, wielded power that could drive people insane, the task of the priests was clear: to staunchly protect the minds of their allies. They would have to purify the minds of their comrades. For this, they would be required to suppress their fear through divine protection, make cold, rational judgments in differentiating allies who could be saved and those who were beyond saving, and not get swept away due to their intense emotions in the heat of battle. It's fine to be like that after the battle is over. But whatever happens, you must not act on your emotions during the battle," Anise stated in a steady voice. Regret always lingered after every battle. Could they not have saved more people? Could they not have reduced the number of corpses even slightly? What if they had done this or that instead? It was inevitable to have such thoughts. However, Anise knew well. Irrespective of her future regrets, she had always chosen the best course of option. The most reliable way to reduce the number of casualties and corpses was to bring down the Demon King in order to secure a victory in the battle. And to defeat the Demon King and win the battle, one should not focus on the weak but only on the strong, like Anise had done by prioritizing Vermouth, Hamel, Molen, and Sienna above everyone else. They were the only formidable people on the battlefield who could steadfastly lead the fight and thrust their swords into the body of the Demon Kings. Thus, Anise had always set her eyes only on those 4 individuals, indifferent to the plight of others, whether they were falling or dying. They had successively fought and won that way and that way alone. After securing a victory, she would always wander around the battlefield, healing those who she could, performing miracles here and there, and praying for the departed souls that she couldn't protect, always bleeding from the wounds on her stigmata. She would be washed with a sense of guilt for those she overlooked and wasn't able to save. In the subjugation of Iris, the Demon King of Fury, all of us should focus on only one person. Even in a situation where most of our allies are dying, we still have to choose to protect and save only one person, Anise declared solemnly. Even the clergy who did not serve the god of light knew who that one person referred to. Even Adel, the self-proclaimed grand warrior of the god of knights and honor, could harbor no other doubts or objections to Christina's declaration. This was because it was pretty obvious. Unlike Adel, who claimed to be his god's grand warrior, that man was the real deal. He was the representative of the light, the master of the holy sword, and the descendant of the hero of the past, the great Vermouth. He was the hero of this era. "Do you think we can do it?" Eugene asked. He was walking towards the helm of the royal ship, Laversia. No one was following behind him as there was nothing they could do together at this moment. "We did it 300 years ago, didn't we?" responded Sienna. She walked beside Eugene, holding Akasha and Frost in each of her hands. She glanced at the 2 staffs and chuckled softly. "In fact, I am in a much better condition now compared to when we killed the Demon King of Fury 300 years ago. It's true that the Eternal Hole has been slightly damaged, but won't cause a significant problem." Sienna was sure that the Eternal Hole wouldn't be burdened if they aimed for a short-term battle. Even if it turned into a prolonged, drawn-out battle, the magic staff forged with the dragon heart could compensate for the flaw in her Eternal Hole to some extent. Sienna continued, "During the battle you will have to use Akasha, but that won't be an issue for me, the wise Sienna. Let me assure you, Eugene, I am stronger now compared to 300 years ago when we faced the Demon King of Fury," she reiterated, speaking sincerely. Back then she couldn't create the Eternal Hole. In fact, she hadn't even completely created the circle's formula. Contrary to Sienna's confidence, Anise, who was walking beside them, was a bit subdued. "I am not quite sure," she finally chimed in. "Christina, and my divine power is stronger compared to mine from 300 years ago, of course. After all, I have become an angel. Christina herself possesses a remarkable level of divine power as well. But I do not know if we will be superior to my past self from 300 years ago." Christina did not bear the sacred stigmata. She hadn't forcibly carved it from the fount of light either. In the past, Anise managed to create miracles such as reattaching severed limbs and reviving dying people by wielding light to vanquish darkness. However, her ability to wield such potent miracles was solely because she had bore a large stigmata on her back. She had been a nearly perfect imitation incarnation of light, created using the remains of the first holy emperor and the previous saints. Anise had been a saint born with a stigmata. Unlike with the other saints, it had not been forcibly engraved but was an innate ability. The stigmata on her back had been small initially, but it expanded and bled each time she performed a divine miracle. But Christina, a replica of Anise, had yet to be endowed with the stigmata. She could not help but wonder, would she have received the stigmata had she concluded the ritual at the Fount of Light? "If you had done so, Christina, you would not have been saved by Hamel," Anise said with a bittersweet smile after reading Christina's thoughts. She continued, "Christina, if we consider how complete you are as the saint, you are superior to me. Though the stigmata has not yet marked you, someday it surely will. The divine trace that marked me bled because my existence was incomplete, but the one that will mark you will not bleed. Sister, Christina said, exhaling deeply, a burden laden in her sigh. Someday is not enough. I need the stigmata now. I need its power for the upcoming battle. Then, we have no choice but to pray, Anise concluded. She understood Christina's urgency. They were faced with the daunting reality that they were facing a true demon king this time, and without the stigmata, she couldn't rescue Eugene from a fatal injury. May the divine will watch over us. May the light embrace us, Anise muttered, her lips quivering slightly as she turned her gaze to study Eugene's face. His eyes were cold and devoid of the fervor of excitement. His lips were firmly closed, the muscles of his jaw twitching as he gritted his teeth. It was a familiar yet dearly missed sight. Hamel always enjoyed battles, and excitement would dance on his face every time they headed into a fight. However, when it was time to ascend to the fortresses of the Demon Kings, Hamel didn't smile. Not even a hint of a smile danced on his lips, leaving others guessing whether he was prepared to die or determined to survive. Anise cherished this expression of Hamel. Vermouth is gone, Eugene thought as he slowly ascended the figurehead at the front of the ships, his movements deliberate and measured. Anise and Sienna remained stationary, not following him any further. Gripping the holy sword, Eugene took a quick, deep breath. Molin is gone too, Eugene's thoughts continued, painfully aware of the missing people from their group. It was different from 300 years ago. Molin, who always rushed forward to shield others, was absent, as was Vermouth, who once wielded the holy sword and the moonlight sword at the heart of their group. Who could replace them? Carmen, Ordis, or Ivik? They hadn't properly coordinated with each other yet, and Eugene had no intention of relying on them either. Because it was Eugene's role to fill the void left behind by Molin and Vermouth. Me? Seriously? Eugene was conscious of the holy sword in his grip. He slowly raised it over his head and felt its unfamiliar weight. He sensed a myriad of emotions coming from behind him. There were gazes laden with various expectations, fears regarding the upcoming battle, and trust in the hero and the descendant of Vermouth. Then there was faith. It's heavy, Eugene mumbled with a wry smile. He had felt this weight 300 years ago as well, when everyone pinned their heavy expectations on Vermouth and his comrades. Back then they were the hope, but Vermouth always remained the true center of that hope, bearing a pressure incomparable to what Hamel felt. Taking another deep breath to clear the noise in his mind, he ensured that his grip on the sword was unburdened by unnecessary tension. The world remained oblivious to Iris becoming the Demon King. They were unaware that here, across this distant sea, a battle between the hero and the Demon King had been initiated after 300 long years. But the people present knew. They knew, and their expectations were transformed into a pressuring atmosphere. He grasped the holy sword with both his hands. He was conscious of Agarotha's ring on his left ring finger, which remained silent. No revelations were heard, yet he felt an added power surge through the already heavy blade. Agaroth, the ancient god of war. Would he be craving for a battle true to his name? The light of the holy sword swelled. Whatever the people behind him expected was none of Eugene's concern. His task, whether as the hero or not, remained unaltered from what it had been 300 years ago during his time as Hamel. It was to slay the Demon King. It has to be you. The voice of Vermouth echoed in his mind from the time they first met in his previous lifetime and the time Eugene spent in the stillness of the dark room. Yes, Eugene muttered as if in response to Vermouth, his lips parting without a smile. It has to be me who kills the Demon King. It had been so since 300 years ago. Hamel had harbored the desire to kill the Demon Kings, not just one but all 5. The light from the sword soared higher, and a pillar of radiance reaching up to the heavens burst forth from Eugene's grasp. Despite holding such immense light, Eugene did not waver in the slightest. "Hey light," Eugene murmured quietly, the holy sword trembling as it radiated brilliance. He glared at the thick and pitch-dark curtain that obstructed his way, the darkness that barred his path forward. Beyond that darkness, across the sea, awaited the Demon King. "I am going to kill the Demon King," Eugene declared. The god, whose voice he had never heard, had always granted him divine power whenever he wished for it. This might very well be his first direct prayer to that deity. Eugene exclaimed as his hands, clasped around the hilt of the sword, overlapped as if in prayer. "So you better give me your strength." Qua. In response to Eugene's words came a unilateral decree. The pillar of light connecting to the sky intensified, seemingly fueled by an added brilliance from the high heavens themselves. A massive beam of light piercing through the dark barriers of the Devil Dome enveloped Eugene as it descended. Eugene stood tall amidst the dazzling radiance, remaining unbothered by the blinding flashes around him. In the midst of the luminescence he looked ahead. His hands were clasped around the sword hilt as if in prayer. The sword emitted a light so bright that the boundary between the blade and the hilt became indiscernible. At that moment the sword was in perfect harmony with Eugene. "Ah!" Anise and Christina exclaimed in unison. The overflowing light enveloped Eugene, then expanded to revel around Laverisa and flowed into the sea. The Crimson Sea was covered in light, and the entire fleet appeared to float on the oscillating brilliance. Anise spread her wings wide. Christina stretched out both her hands, and the surging waves of light reached out to touch her. In that instant she felt a tingling sensation in the middle of her left palm. There was no blood, yet a thin line was etched into her open palm. Then Eugene swung the holy sword. A single swing was all it took. The pillar of light that connected to the sky crumbled, transforming into a massive strike that cleaved the darkness in half. Sinking with it, Christina abruptly raised her left hand adorned with the stigmata. Whoosh! Particles of light morphed into feathers and fluttered gracefully. The sea of light undulated violently and propelled the fleet upwards. "My goodness!" Sienna had witnessed everything, but she could not help but exclaim at this extraordinary sight. She hadn't expected to see such a miracle so soon. Watching Eugene's silhouette flickering in the luminescent glow, she felt a stirring in her chest. Light and the hero. For Sienna, these epithets had been closer to vermouth than to Eugene until now. But from this moment onward, it felt like that would no longer be the case. She lifted Akasha and Frost with both her hands. The eternal hole opened and the two staffs poured out waves of nearly infinite mana. A tremendous wind arose. A spell enveloped the entire barrier surrounding the fleet. Winds from behind propelled the fleet forward as the sea of light created waves. The fleet, embraced by the light, cleaved through the darkness, advancing steadfastly. Chapter 366. The Devil Dome 7. Thick and pervasive dark power conjured the night. It was a night where the sun would never rise and where not even stars existed. A night unyielding to the glow of a fire. Iris sat within the abyss of darkness she had forged herself. "They're coming," she commented. Her crimson lips curved into a smirk, and her chin lifted in anticipation as she giggled in the enveloping darkness. She did not see them yet. While she could have seen if she wished to, Iris chose not to. She could feel them without seeing, and it gave her a bigger thrill to feel them like this rather than seeing them with her own eyes. A tremble of anticipation and delight shook her frame. They were approaching steadily and unnaturally fast, as if endowed with wings in this windless sea. An irritating discomfort hinted at the presence of divine power. It was only natural given that they were the saint and the hero. "Let's go greet them tomorrow," Iris thought. That didn't mean she wasn't unprepared. Raising her head, Iris peered forward. In the profound darkness, a different kind of darkness existed, one molded and nurtured by Iris herself. It was a cradle and shelter harboring her kin, the Rebels of Fury, an organization she had fostered for 300 years. They were loyal subjects who never abandoned her, even during the tyranny and contempt from the demons of Helmuth. They were followers who revered her as a princess and dreamt of Fury's resurgence by her side. But not all had remained true. Among the 100 dark elves that comprised the Rebels of Fury, only about 30 had experienced the era of war with Iris. The rest were those corrupted after the war ended, elves dying of plague, sold into slavery, or forcibly kidnapped and brought to damnation. Yet once they transformed into dark elves, loyalty to Iris became inevitable. Wasn't that enough? To Iris, the Rebels of Fury were her family, precisely the 103 dark elves. The utmost desire Iris harbored was to resurrect her deceased father. An unfulfilled wish for bringing her father back to life proved impossible. Yet Iris had ascended as the Demon King herself. She had not given herself a new name but rather succeeded her father's legacy, perpetuating her heritage as the Demon King of Fury. At this moment, Fury had reincarnated. She respected and adored her father, who had shown kindness to his children and had bestowed great power upon her, a mere dark elf. Those belonging to the rebels of Fury were a family that had endured hardships and shared joys with her for 3 centuries. And so she imparted strength upon them, just as she had received from her father. She granted power to her dark elf kin. It wouldn't be long before they would awaken from their cradle. As for the other subordinates, the pirates, she held no affection or interest for them. Yet, considering they were too feeble as humans to be a part of Fury's army, she bestowed upon them power in a manner not too burdensome. Due to the reckless infusion of dark power, their personalities had collapsed and their race altered. But that was not for Iris to concern herself with. "Shall we start from here?" Iris mumbled while leaning in her chair. The languid darkness embraced her bare form. A titter escaped her lips as she slowly buttoned up her newly worn shirt. "Or will you grant me territory?" Her eyes, red as blood, slowly rose upwards. Darkness surged forward. What was pushed back was darkness belonging to Iris, her dark power. The 2 curtains of black weren't identical. The impending abyss bore a deeper hue, a stronger force. Iris keenly felt the truth and clenched her fists. The creeping sensation was invoking an unavoidable, guarding fear. Could one feel fear even after becoming the Demon King? No, Iris told herself with resolve. It was precisely because she had become the Demon King that she could sense this fear. Iris could perceive the absurdity of the entity steering the encroaching darkness and dark power. Humans or demons alike wouldn't be able to grasp the true nature of that being. However, being the Demon King, she was more attuned to that terror. They were not the same. Though both were called Demon Kings, they were decidedly not equals. A disparity existed, magnified by the fact that Iris inherited memories from her father, the previous Demon King of Fury. It enhanced her certainty of the fear she felt towards that entity. A grinding noise echoed, the clashing and pulling of iron chains. Amidst the sound of chains, a pair of eyes emerged, ominously foreboding, worn out and grim. He was an existence not guilty yet shackled as a sinner, a Demon King revered by others of his kind, an existence even the other Demon Kings feared. He reigned supreme among the Demon Kings. He was dubbed the Great Demon King, the one who imprisoned the abyss in the deep sea. "Congratulations," his voice sounded. Iris' dark power couldn't infringe upon the dark power of incarceration. Though this was Iris' domain, the moment the Demon King of Incarceration appeared, the ownership of the realm changed. Yet Iris couldn't even harbor discomfort at this fact. "I want to convey my condolences," the Demon King of Incarceration said. He bore the same visage as when Iris last saw him. There was not a hint of light in his dull and red eyes. His complexion was completely devoid of vitality, and his black hair reached his waist. His body was so skinny it seemed almost tragic, and he was draped in countless chains. He was unchanged, identical to when she had last seen him in Helmuth, even 300 years ago. Even in her inherited memories, he was a figure perpetually the same, standing above the fog and waves at the end of times in the previous era. "At some point my child will come to this sea." When her father had said that, the Demon King of Incarceration had nodded indifferently. Back then, no emotions had adorned his face. It was still the same now. Despite congratulating her, there was no joy, and in conveying condolences, no sorrow was visible on the face of the Demon King of Incarceration. Consolation. Iris twisted her lips in a derisive smile as she spoke with rebellion brimming in her voice. "Why should I receive consolation? You must have realized it by now." The voice of the Demon King of Incarceration was calm, starkly contrasting with Iris' sharp tone. With a rustling sound, the chains that dragged behind him like a cloak intertwined and transformed into a chair. The Demon King of Incarceration comfortably sat down and rested his arms on the armrests. He showcased an air of assurance as he spoke. "You must know what lies at the bottom of this sea, how this sea was created and what transpired here. Well, the current you should know, that is." He continued, his voice exuding confidence yet detached. "I made sure that's how things would be. But if you remain ignorant, well, that's a serious issue. I loathe issues I did not intend even more." The dark, penetrating gaze fixed on Iris as if scrutinizing and unraveling every part of her. Swallowing hard, she clenched her fists, her body soon engulfed by surging dark power. I know, Demon King of Incarceration. My father, he died in this sea. Took his own life to transfer it to you. Death, you say? He mused, acknowledging her perception. Not entirely incorrect. The Demon King of Fury. Your father indeed died here long ago, and I accepted it. Iris bit her lip, her mind swirling with unresolved questions, haunted by what she witnessed in the abyss in the deep sea. The closed gate, the fog and the waves engulfing the world, her father choosing death, and the handover of his life to the Demon King of Incarceration. So what about 300 years ago? The father Iris remembered ruled as the Demon King of Fury since 300 years ago, no, even before that. The Demon King of Incarceration tilted his head slightly, his expression neutral yet not rigid. You must have many questions. I understand, Iris. I let it flow to you according to the promise. However, that is a distant memory. It may not fully connect with the memories you hold now. There will be gaps. Iris hesitated before stammering, will you answer if I ask? Her mind raced with questions. Who was the Demon King of Incarceration really? What had she seen in the abyss? Why had her father, who had died in this sea, been alive in Helmuth? No, came the swift and unyielding reply. I am not obligated to answer your questions. That wasn't part of the pact with the Fury. You do not possess the right to hear the truth from me. Iris ground her teeth, her eyes boiling with dark power. It resonated with her anger and turned increasingly darker. How fierce! The Demon King of Incarceration's tone remained unfazed by her hostility or murderous intent, his gaze steady and peaceful as he spoke. Do you wish to hear answers from me? You won't be able to force them out of me, though. Do you take me for a fool? Iris shot back defiantly. He replied dismissively, emphasizing her weakness that she too was aware of. I have no choice but to regard you as such. Aren't you aware of your frailty? With a creaking sound, the chains connected to the Demon King of Incarceration began to move. Like serpents, they slithered and spread across the floor, and with their movement Iris felt her dark power being pushed back, a stark reminder of the chasm in their power. But no matter how frail you are, I respect you, Demon King of Fury, whispered the Demon King of Incarceration. The malevolent and ominous Demon King had called Iris by that name. It sent shivers down Iris' spine. She trembled slightly and swallowed hard. Do you recognize me as the Demon King of Fury? She asked with anticipation. Iris, for you to continue that legacy has been the will of the last Fury. I bestowed upon you the legacy of Fury according to our agreement. I see no reason not to acknowledge you as the Demon King of Fury, the Demon King of Incarceration said, glancing at the floor with a slight smile. The spreading chains suddenly halted their movement. I will not grant you a territory, Incarceration stated. The chains retracted. A territory is a land conquered by the Demon Kings themselves. Demon King of Fury, if you desire to have a territory in Helmuth, you must seize it from me. Will you do that? The Demon King of Incarceration asked lightly. Iris could not answer. Fight against that absurd monster of a Demon King and seize her own territory? It was impossible for the Iris of now. Seems like you won't, the Demon King of Incarceration commented. He did not feel the slightest disappointment at Iris' silence. Then you have no choice but to start from here, Incarceration said softly in the same neutral tone. Iris' eyes widened at the murmured words. Are you giving me advice? Iris stuttered, finding it hard to believe what she had just heard. The Demon King of Incarceration nodded slightly, then said, This place has a deep history. Many events unfolded and everything is buried in this sea. I vividly remember what the landscape was like before it became a sea. Iris knew it. She was well aware that this sea was once the territory of the Demon King of Fury. Her father had ruled this land and Iris and her siblings had grown up loved by him. Demon King of Fury, if you rise from this land, it can genuinely be said that you have inherited the legacy of Fury. Your father, the former Demon King of Fury, was defeated here, fled and died, the Demon King of Incarceration said. Iris had nothing to say to this as she knew the words were true. History often repeats itself, the Demon King of Incarceration stated in a simple manner. He looked back on the years past, and on the events that were still far away in the future but were gradually approaching with a certainty. He continued, Will you be defeated, flee or die? Let me make one thing clear, Demon King of Fury. I will not be by your side when you die. There will be no pact between us. You might be defeated, flee, and die like your father, but you will not leave a legacy behind. I'm different, Iris said. She chuckled bitterly, then spat. I will be defeated, flee, and die? There's no way. Are you serious, Demon King of Incarceration? Oh, I see. You want to test me? Iris' laughter grew louder. She sincerely laughed at the Demon King of Incarceration's words. There's no Hamel to rage like a lunatic, no Molan to charge in like an idiot. So what if Sienna Meridian is here? What difference does it make? The hero who comes here now isn't Vermouth. The current saint isn't a niece. Iris said mockingly, as if reminding Incarceration about the situation at hand. The Demon King of Incarceration slowly rose while listening to Iris' laughter. Iris continued, Demon King of Incarceration, I heard you would wait for the hero at Babel. You won't be able to welcome the hero at Babel. I, the Demon King of Fury, will kill that bastard in this sea. Iris shook her head while laughing wildly. With a clatter, the chains that formed the chair dispersed. In this sea, at my father's first burial ground, I will offer the hero and the saint as sacrifices. I will destroy Sienna Meridian, the wretch who contributed to my father's death, until she begs pitifully for death. I vow to all who dare to charge at me, the Demon King of Fury, that I will cast them all into the sea. By doing so, everyone in the world will know of Fury's return. Without me having to declare it, everyone will know this sea as the domain of Fury and fear it. If, the Demon King of Incarceration said, if you kill Eugene Lionheart. The Demon King of Incarceration knew the name of the hero. Christina Rogerus. He knew the name of the saint. Sienna Meridian. He knew the name of the wizard he defeated 300 years ago. If you kill those three and bury them in the sea, he said. The lips of the Demon King of Incarceration moved. For the first time since arriving here, he revealed emotion on his face. It was a wide curve stretching into a grin. While smiling, the Demon King of Incarceration whispered to Iris. There were emotions carried in his voice, which had previously been devoid of any feelings. He was beckoning her seductively and encouraging her. I'll answer your question, the Demon King of Incarceration promised. A fire ignited in Iris' pupils. Without waiting for a response, the Demon King of Incarceration turned away, leaving behind a snickering laughter. Then the smile vanished from the face of the Demon King of Incarceration. Fate often repeated itself. The Demon King of Incarceration knew this all too well. Chapter 367. The Demon King of Fury, 1. Carmen slowly flexed her fingers. There was no noticeable discomfort when she moved her joints. After clenching and unclenching her fist a few times, she suddenly thrust out her fist without moving a single step. Whoosh! Gundor's hair and beard were blown back by a rush of wind as a fist suddenly flew past his face. Too surprised to even react appropriately, Gundor simply fell down on the spot. It's amazing, Carmen muttered in a quiet voice. Considering the usual Carmen, this was a very calm and subdued reaction coming from her. After all, this was no ordinary gauntlet but a gauntlet created from a dragon's skin and scales. Moreover, that dragon was Raizakia, the only dragon in the history of the continent to have been called the Demon Dragon. Even the gauntlet's coloring was unusual, a black hue that seemed like it was drawing in your soul. There were many elements to the gauntlet that seemed like they would cause Carmen a lot of excitement, but Carmen's eyes were actually very calm. If she had received this gauntlet during any ordinary time, Carmen would definitely be leaping from boat to boat showing off her new weapon. However, right now she didn't have the luxury of mind to do something like that. Carmen just stood where she was, silently confirming the gauntlet's performance. Do you have any regrets? Carmen asked absent-mindedly as her left hand was engulfed in pure white flames. Gundor, who had been busy straightening his hair and beard, blinked in surprise at the sudden question. Gah! Gundor laughed as he flopped down into a chair. He scratched his chin a few times and then lit a smoking pipe he had set down beside him earlier. Well, I can't say that I don't have any regrets at all, Gundor admitted with a cough. Ahem, something like regrets. Well, doesn't that apply to everyone? After all, we came here to catch a dark elf, not a demon king. A dark elf and a demon king. There's a vast difference between those two things. Gundor's voice was hesitant, as if it was hard to put the thoughts running through his head into words. The reason for that was simple. He was scared. He was scared by the thought of fighting a demon king. Although while you all are fighting, I'll probably just be hiding in this workshop, Gundor confessed reluctantly. Or perhaps you need an old-timer like me to come out and take a few swings of my axe? He asked as if in an afterthought. There's no need for that, Carmen assured him. Since Lady Sienna and Saint Christina have prepared a shelter for the non-combatants and the wounded, an old man like you should just hide in there safely. In fact, that just makes it even scarier, Gundor said with a laugh as he put down his smoking pipe. After all, doesn't that mean in this battle I won't even be able to hold my own life squarely in my own hands? If you manage to kill the Demon King, I will survive, and if you fail to kill the Demon King, I'm dead. Honestly, that's what I'm most afraid of, Gundor confessed. Demon King, I'm dead. Honestly, that's what I'm most afraid of, Gundor confessed. Instead of replying to that, Carmen just calmly met Gundor's eyes. With a bashful expression on his face, Gundor shook his head and said, Ahem, of course it must also be scary for those of you who will have to actually fight the Demon King, but for me, if you ask me if I have any regrets, well, now that things have come to this point, it would just be embarrassing for me to regret my choice and say something like, I shouldn't have come here. Well, I admit that my head is a bit of a mess with all sorts of thoughts flying around. Part of it is just worrying for my own future. And the other part of it is worrying about my fellow dwarfs who were kidnapped by Iris, Gundor muttered in a gloomy voice. If Iris had become a Demon King, what could have happened to the subordinates under her command? Were the Dark Elves still Dark Elves? Were the pirates still pirates? What about the dwarves who had been treated like slaves? Would they still be dwarves? Carmen wondered for a moment whether she should say something like, nothing will happen, or they'll be fine, but in the end she chose to remain silent. She couldn't make any confident guesses as to the current state of the kidnapped dwarves. We'll make sure that you're able to return safely, old man, Carmen promised in a quiet voice. What Carmen could take responsibility for with her own two hands was protecting the non-combatants and fighting the Demon King. Carmen lowered her gauntlet-clad hand and bowed her head deeply towards Gundor. There were a lot of things that she wanted to protect, especially her young disciples Seal and Desra. After all, wasn't the upcoming battle far too dangerous for those young people with bright futures ahead of them? If something were to happen to those two during this battle. Carmen's shoulders shook just from imagining it. Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. No way, came the expected reply. You want me to hide in the shelter? Don't you think that you're going a bit too far? Seal was so dumbfounded that she let out an angry laugh. Think about it carefully, Eugene. If you were to rank the thousands of people currently preparing to fight against the Demon King in order of skill, where do you think I would be? Seal demanded. Instead of replying, Eugene just stared at Seal. Beside her, Desra was fidgeting uneasily as she kept glancing between Eugene and Seal. Seal answered her own question. At the very least, I'd be in the top 20, right? Seal wasn't wrong. She currently held the 7th place in Shimuan's tournament ranking. That meant Seal was the 7th strongest of all of Shimuan's gladiators. Of course, fighters higher in the ranking than Seal were also participating in this subjugation expedition. There were also knights who had never registered in the rankings in the first place. However, even after taking all of that into account, Seal was still someone who could be considered an elite warrior. Among the humans, that is. Our enemy is a Demon King, Eugene, who had been standing there silently, finally spoke. Being strong compared to everyone else who's part of the subjugation expedition isn't all that impressive when it comes to fighting against a Demon King. The only ones who could stand in battle against the Demon Kings were those who had gone beyond the boundaries of humanity. According to Eugene's judgment, let alone going beyond those boundaries, Seal had yet to even reach the boundary. In the subjugation expedition, only the elite among the humans like Carmen, Ortis, and Ivik who stood at or had crossed the boundaries of humanity were capable of standing against the Demon King. In other words, most of the expedition forces were not qualified to take part in this fight against the Demon King. You're wrong, Eugene, Seal said, shaking her head. I'm not going to be fighting the Demon King. I'm going to be fighting the Demon King's subordinates. Eugene just looked at Seal silently. I'm well aware that I'm not qualified to fight against the Demon King. However, I can still fight her subordinates, Seal insisted firmly. At these words, Eugene had no choice but to grin wryly. It had been like this 300 years ago as well. During their battles against the Demon Kings, Most of the ones who had participated in the battles were too weak to be qualified to fight against the Demon Kings. Their role had been to open up a path for those who were qualified to face the Demon Kings and help preserve the latter's strength so that they could fight at full power. They were the ones who had fought against all of the demon folk, demonic beasts, and black wizards serving the Demon Kings. And after opening up a path, most of them were already dead. It would most likely be the same this time as well. So to ensure the bare minimum of losses, Eugene had ignored all calls to retreat. He had mocked the suggestion that they should withdraw to make better preparations and return with reinforcements. The more time you gave them, the stronger the Demon King would become and the larger their forces would grow. So, in order to have the least amount of sacrifices, the best choice was to continue advancing forward instead of retreating. "You just don't want to see me get hurt or killed," Seal said with a dawning realization. Although she shouldn't be amused by something like this, Seal still smiled brightly without even realizing she was doing it. She was aware that such feelings were twisted, but Seal's heart still pounded in excitement as she felt Eugene's concern for her. At the same time, she also felt slightly miserable. If it weren't for something like this, would she ever be able to catch Eugene's attention? Seal reminded him, "Don't be swayed by your emotions, Eugene Lionheart. You are the hero." Even while experiencing such twisted feelings, Seal still expressed herself clearly. She was glad to be treated like someone special, but she couldn't allow him to continue doing so. "Are you really going to pay attention to each and every person who might die in this battle? Or else? As I thought, it's because of me you're paying special attention, right? Although I'm grateful that you care, now isn't the time for that," Seal admonished him. "If the enemy was just a mere dark elf," Eugene finally spoke up, "no matter what the situation was, I would be able to protect you. No matter what kind of trick Iris might pull, I could make sure that she wouldn't touch you." This time, it was Seal's turn to remain silent. "However, it's impossible now that she's a Demon King," Eugene sighed. "Once the battle breaks out, I will have to focus all my attention on Iris. That goes for Lady Sienna and Christina as well." "Of course that would be the case," Seal replied with a snort. "Don't worry about me. I'll avoid any lopsided or dangerous fights. If the enemy feels too strong or dangerous, I'll just run away from them." "That's easier said than done," Eugene grumbled with a sigh. "Do you really think it will be all that difficult? In that case, Eugene, all you need to do is finish the battle as quickly as possible," Seal said as she got up from her seat. She stared into Eugene's face for a few moments, taking in his gray hair and deep-set golden eyes. Seal recalled Eugene's appearance as he had held up the holy sword. How his back had looked as he made his way to Laversia's figurehead in front of thousands of spectators. His figure as a pillar of light had fallen from the sky, and the darkness that blocked their way ahead was cut apart with a single sword slash. At that moment, everyone had recognized him as the hero. The same applied to Seal. She would never forget the sight of Eugene engulfed in that brilliant glow. Seal solemnly requested, "Trust me, Eugene. Like how I trust you." But Seal wasn't going to say those last words. There were already a lot of people counting on Eugene. That was just the kind of entity that a hero was, now and in the past. Someone that people trusted, someone they had to trust, someone who made people trust in them. Just as Eurus had created the saint to serve as a figurehead that attracted people's belief, hope, and faith, a hero too wasn't all that different at their core. "Nothing will happen to me," Seal whispered to Eugene with a sly grin. Then Seal spun around and immediately left the room. Desra, who was momentarily left at a loss for what to do, quickly followed after Seal. "Should I have just told him that I planned to enter the shelter?" Seal asked with a wry smile as she turned back to look at Desra, who was trailing behind her. "Or perhaps you at least can stay in the shelter, Desra. It should be safe there." A saint and the greatest wizard in the entire history of the continent would focus all their strength on erecting a barrier over a single ship. When the battle eventually broke out, that refuge ship would be the safest place to be. "No way," Desra replied with a shake of her head. "If Lady Seal won't be going there, why should I go? No, even if you were shameful enough to hide in there, Lady Seal, I still wouldn't run from this battle." "Why not?" Seal asked. "Because I am also a Lionheart," Desra stated firmly. To think that she would actually hear such words coming from Desra's lips. Seal blinked in surprise before bursting into laughter. "As a mere collateral line, you shouldn't say something so arrogant," Seal chided. Desra shrugged. "In any case, Lady Seal will also end up as part of the collateral bloodlines in around 15 years. Desra had struck an accurate comeback. If Cyan did marry Princess Isla and give birth to a child, Seal and Eugene would be removed from the main line to form new collateral lines. That was how the Lionheart's main line had always operated. The same went for Gilead's younger brother, who now lived peacefully in the quiet countryside. As for Guion and Carmen, who were members of the Black Lions, strictly speaking, they had already been removed from the main line and were now counted as part of the collateral bloodlines. That might be the case, but you and I are still on a different level. Seal eventually stammered out a weak response, unable to come up with a good argument to Desra's words. A Lionheart, what did it mean to be a Lionheart? Seal suddenly turned her head to look up at the sky. The sky was shining brightly. Golden waves were also lapping in the sea below. However, outside of this circle of bright light, a deep darkness was lurking all around them. Beyond the golden waves, the sea held a dark crimson color of dried blood. Sienna's magic, as well as Eugene and Christina's divine powers, could only protect a small area encompassing the fleet. The sea they were caught in was still part of the Devildom. Eugene emerged from his cabin. The moment that he stepped out, everyone's eyes turned towards Eugene. Quite a few people clasped their hands together in prayer as soon as they saw Eugene. Eugene ignored these gazes and walked out onto the deck. The holy sword hanging from Eugene's waist was still shining with light, but Eugene's sharpened senses were solely focused on peering into the gloom ahead. It would be better if they all went and got some sleep, Eugene muttered softly as his lips twitched into a frown. There is no way they could sleep at a time like this. Tempest's voice sounded inside Eugene's head. Not wanting to place all of the burden on Sienna, Eugene also borrowed Tempest's strength to propel the fleet forward. Tempest continued. The people of today's era don't know anything about fighting a demon king. Such ignorance easily turns into fear. At the very least, you seem to be in a good mood, Eugene responded to Tempest with an amused snort. At this, Tempest laughed and admitted in a low voice, "Don't you feel like this is a repeat?" "A repeat of the remnants of the demon kings you defeated at the Black Lion Castle," Tempest replied. "Back then, a spirit of darkness had possessed Uid as part of a plot to revive the remnants of the demon kings. You faced the ghosts of both carnage and cruelty, but you still defeated them all by yourself. Even though they had yet to transform into a full demon king, Hamel, you still managed to erase all traces of carnage and cruelty from this world," Tempest reminded him encouragingly. Eugene didn't say anything in response. "And now you're on your way to defeat the demon king of fury," Tempest sighed. 300 ago you slayed these demon kings together with Vermouth. And now that you have been reincarnated, you're going back through them one by one. Eugene had been wondering what Tempest was going on about. Now he grinned and nodded. "As you said, this really is a repeat. It's all because these demon kings are hardy bastards who don't have the decency to die even if you kill them." Eugene climbed up to the ship's figurehead. He soon spotted Christina's back, where she was sitting on top of the center of the large figurehead. Her 8 wings were all spread wide open as her left hand was held out in front of her. She was looking down at her stigmata. When Eugene had prayed to the god of light for strength, light had poured down from the heavens in response. Then a stigmata had also appeared in the palm of Christina's left hand. It was different from the stigmata that had been carved into Anissa's back. It wasn't in the shape of a word, and it didn't bleed whenever she performed a miracle. Did this mean Christina would now be able to perform miracles on par with Anisse? She hadn't gotten the chance to test that yet. If she wanted to test it, she would have to cut off someone's limb first, but who would be crazy enough to be willing to get their limb cut off just for a test? If only Mullen was here, he would have cut off his own arm without any hesitation, Eugene said regretfully. Anisse teased back, "How about chopping off a finger, Hamel? Even if we can't stick it back on, you should still be okay with just a single finger missing." Eugene frowned. "Don't say something so ridiculous, Anisse. Don't you know how important the fingers are when wielding a blade?" "Oh my, is that so? I still feel like it would be okay to chop off a certain middle finger that only ever does bad things." Anisse giggled as she turned to look at Eugene. Eugene came to a stop by Anissa's side, staring straight ahead. "How is your body?" Eugene eventually asked. "I'm fine," Anisse assured him. "I'm not tired in the slightest. Even so, Christina is telling me that I should rest for a bit." Eugene nodded. "What about your stigmata?" Whether it's by how much it has increased our power or what kind of miracles it will allow us to perform. I'm not really sure. After all, a miracle is something that you must wish for with an earnest heart, Anise said as she stood up. Don't worry too much, Hamel. If your arm or your leg goes flying during the battle, I'll make sure to save you somehow. Don't do anything unnecessary, Eugene warned as he turned to Anise. I'm the one who usually says stuff like that, Anise pointed out with a laugh as she reached back and pulled the hood of her robe over her head. Boom. The iron ball that formed the head of her flail, which had been hidden inside her robe, fell onto the figurehead. You're the one who shouldn't do anything unnecessary, Anise reminded Eugene. The flail wasn't the only thing Anise had hidden within her robe. Anise took out an unopened bottle of liquor and handed it to Eugene with a smile. It's been a long time, Eugene said with a grin as he flexed a finger. Pop. The cork of the liquor bottle went flying. They're coming, Sienna's voice suddenly rang inside their heads. Eugene and Anise weren't the only ones to have heard her voice. The entire fleet had heard Sienna's warning. Eugene slowly drew the holy sword. Roar. As the dark red sea outside the barrier split apart. Chapter 368. The Demon King of Fury, 2. Whoa. A huge blue whale leaped up from the carved open sea. It didn't look to be alive and well. This gigantic sea beast that had once wandered all over the ocean in search of its prey and had even devoured monsters had now lost all sense of self after being contaminated by a demon king's dark power. The thing that was now charging at them was nothing more than a hunk of rotten meat wrapped up in the hide of a blue whale. However, its humongous size was still the same as it had been in life. To those on the Laversia, it looked as if a ship of comparable size to their own flagship was leaping at them. The people behind Eugene let out cries of surprise, but his expression was as calm as ever. When it came to large monsters, he had already seen far too many of them. Raizakia, whom he had fought last time, was even larger than this whale. And this whale was only as big as a single leg of Kamash, the chieftain of the giant tribe whom he had slain 300 years ago. The barrier that had been protecting the fleet disappeared as if it had been switched off. Immediately after this, Eugene kicked off the figurehead and leaped into the sky. Compared to the enormous shadow cast by the whale leaping at them, Eugene looked like a small black dot. At that moment, light burst forth from the holy sword. The whale's shadow completely disappeared, and the whole world was illuminated for an instant. Ryayap. The whale's body was torn into dozens of pieces, its contaminated blood spilling all over the sea, but the golden waves didn't seem tainted in the slightest. Eugene flew past the dismembered whale. Coming to a halt high up in the sky, he gazed at what lay ahead. He saw fog advancing towards them, and inside of that fog, Eugene narrowed his eyes as he peered into the fog's depth. Ha! He let out a scornful laugh as his lips twitched in a smile. He had spotted an ugly-looking pirate ship. Its Jolly Roger bore the image of an upside-down goat's skull. With one pair of horns that curved outwards and one that thrust straight up, this upside-down twin-horned mountain goat skull was the sigil that the Demon King of Fury had once used 300 years ago. There was only one crazy bitch who would so proudly hang up a flag like that. Iris, the new Demon King of Fury. The moment that Eugene spotted the pirate ship, Iris had also caught sight of Eugene. A pair of huge red eyes opened up in the midst of that black fog. The pupils of these red eyes were dyed a murky black. These were the demonies of darkness. This ability, along with Iris herself, had evolved with the power of the Demon King. The moment those eyes shone with light, the sea around the pirate ship turned black. The power of those demonies was being spread across the whole surface of the sea. Krawish. 10 ships burst out from the darkness, landing with a loud splash. Eugene let out another scornful laugh at this sight. He would call them ships only because there was no better word for them, but the things that had appeared out of the darkness weren't actual ships. First of all, they were large, far too large. Several times larger than the largest of all ships. They were as big as a regular castle. If one wanted to exaggerate a little, they were as big as a mountain. Each of them appeared to have been created by smashing dozens of ships into pieces with dark power before mixing those pieces together with living flesh. Those dozens of ships had been formed into the bones of these new creations, and then the flesh of sea animals and humans had been draped onto the wooden skeletons. With even more dark power infused into these monstrosities, they had been revived as bizarre demonic beasts that could no longer be called ships. On top of each of these 10 gigantic demonic beasts, There was also a new breed of monsters that, in a similar fashion to these ships, could no longer be called humans. Their appearance looked as if a child had tried to make humans out of clay as part of a joke. They were only alive and moving because dark power was acting as a replacement for their life force. If not for that, their forms were so misshapen that it seemed impossible for them to stay alive and well. This was the fate of the thousands of pirates who had been under Iris' command. "It seems that I'm not that good a sculptor," Iris admitted with a smirk as she idly crossed her legs in her seat on one of the ships. With her demonies floating in the sky, Iris was able to observe the entirety of her puny enemies. Facing her was a fleet of 100 ships. Among all these ships, the only one that caught Iris' attention was the leading flagship, the Laversia. Iris encouraged herself, "But even if you're not too good at something, that just means you should practice more. Isn't that right? After all, I'll have plenty of materials to practice with starting from today." With a giggle, Iris raised both hands into the air. Roar. The sea, which had been dyed a pitch black, surged upwards along with the movement of Iris' hands. It appeared as if an entire patch of sea had been transformed into a larger copy of Iris' hands. "I'm still not quite used to this weapon," Anise muttered to herself. Bam! A falling chunk of flesh from the dead whale was struck by Anise's flail and sent flying. Floating back down onto the figurehead, Eugene glanced at Ansi and said, "I didn't throw that at you on purpose. You've always been sloppy when it comes to the finer details," Anise said with a laugh as she rested the heavy iron ball, the head of her flail, onto the figurehead. "No matter what, I think I still prefer the mace." "In that case, shall I come out, sister?" Christina offered. "All right," Anise agreed with a wry smile, showing no sign of refusal. The saint for this battle, no, for this era, should and would be Christina Rogerus. Anise had no intention of stealing or usurping Christina's role. That said, it didn't mean Anise would stay out of the fight altogether. Their consciousnesses swapped places. While sensing Anise's concern and affection for her, Christina tightened her grip on her flail. There was already a thick smell of blood in the air, and she could now see a fleet that appeared to be made of rotten meat sailing towards them. Compared to the Demon King's army ahead of them, their own forces seemed small and weak. Although their fleet was larger in number, the individual sizes of their ships were much smaller. But Christina couldn't afford to pay any attention to this. Instead, Christina kept her eyes on Eugene's back as he again flew up into the sky. Christina's gaze wasn't the only one glued to Eugene's back. The Slad Mercenary Company's ship, the Formery, was sticking closely to Laversia's rear. Dozens of priests and paladins were also gazing up at Eugene's back from Formery. After taking a deep breath, Christina declared, "A lot of people are going to die." Her quiet voice managed to reach not only the clergy aboard the Formery but also the rest of the fleet. "But instead of looking back, we need to focus on what lies ahead," Christina reminded her listeners. If their opponent wasn't a demon king and this battlefield wasn't one with a demon king present, the priests could have allowed their focus to widen slightly. However, this was indeed a battle against a demon king. As such, the priest's focus had to become infinitely narrower. On this battlefield, the only two things that the saint and the priests needed to pay attention to were the hero and the demon king. They couldn't afford to look back at the rest of the fleet. The Laversia would continue to sail forward, and the Formery, acting as the support, would also sail alongside the Laversia. But apart from those two, the dozens of other ships in their fleet would be staying behind to fight against the mountain-sized demonic beasts and the now-inhuman pirates. Christina took another breath and continued, "As such, Sir Eugene, you should also keep looking ahead." The barrier of divine power had been removed. In this dire battle, continuing to protect the entire fleet would be too much of a waste of her divine power. Even so, Christina still left a minimal layer of protection for them. The swirling sea of light gradually diminished until the only remaining golden waves were pooled within the small areas where the fleet's ships were floating. "Please open up the way ahead for everyone," Christina prayed. This whole scene, if you could look down on it from somewhere high above, would look as if there were dozens of sparkling dots of light floating atop the pitch-black sea. The waves of light would allow their fleet's ships to move quickly, fluidly, and agilely. The magic engine attached to each of their ships gave them access to more maneuverability than manpower alone could offer, and the winds created by Tempest and Sienna would add even more acceleration. "It is an honor," Maze said as he gazed at Sienna's back. In this battle, control of the fleet's magical defenses would be handled by Maze. Someone like me, a newbie who has just managed to reach the 8th circle. Maze paused, almost overwhelmed. I can't believe I am actually standing on the same battlefield as Lady Sienna. Maze's signature spell was called Battleship. It was a spell that allowed him to arm a ship with various enhancements. Usually, Maze's signature was used in combination with the Laversia, a partnership where the royal family's strongest servant enhanced the Shimuan kingdom's strongest warship. It was because the union of the two was seen to be powerful that Maze, as the commander of the court wizards, had been personally assigned to the subjugation expedition. During the journey, Sienna had adjusted Maze's signature spell. As a result, it was no longer restricted to just the Laversia. Instead, the entire fleet could now be covered by Maze's spell. But as a result, the consumption of mana had also increased exponentially. Fortunately, the spell was still viable after attaching all the battle wizards in the Slad mercenary company to supply Maze with mana. It would have been difficult for Maze to last even an hour on his own. Make sure not to get carried away and advance too far forward, Sienna warned Maze without turning her head. Crackle, cracker, crackle. An overlapping mass of circles churned within her fully expanded eternal hole. The violently swirling mana poured out from her chest and into Frost, which she was holding with both hands. Yet Sienna still had some attention to spare. If you get too close, you might get swept away by my magic. Everything that could be done for the forces assigned to cover their rear had been done. Sienna had strengthened the refuge ship's barrier, adjusted Maze's signature, and even prepared a technique that would allow the other wizards to combine their strengths. Also, if you go any further ahead, Sienna muttered with narrowed eyes. There was a staticky sensation in the air. It felt as if her magical senses were strangely off-tilt. This was something familiar. Most magic didn't solely rely on the wizard's own mana reserves. A wizard's mana and their circles were only the first step in casting a spell. During the following steps, the spell could only be fully manifested in conjunction with the natural mana in the air. But something ahead of them was strange. Even in a Devildom, mana still existed. No matter how strong a Demon King's dark power might be, there was nowhere in this world where mana simply did not exist. The only exceptions to this rule were places not of this world. Like the place Molan frequently visited, the other side of the Lahanjar. The dimensional gap where Raizakia had been sealed had also been one such place. Finally, there was also the Precipice of Babel, where they had fought the Demon King of Incarceration. Wherever the Demon King had spread his chains, which were part of Incarceration's unique ability, magic didn't work properly. All of the mana in the air had been tied up by those chains, and any magic circles that Sienna had constructed disappeared the moment that they touched one of those chains, with all of their mana getting absorbed. Sienna had created the Eternal Hole in the first place to fight against the Demon King of Incarceration. If she wasn't able to use the mana in the air, then as a wizard she would just have to train her own internal reserves. She had also learned how to manifest her magic solely through her own will, without having to draw on the outside world. Apart from me, no one else will be able to use magic, Sienna revealed. It was thanks to her past that Sienna could be sure of this assertion. The sense of suppression wasn't as powerful when she had fought against the Demon King of Incarceration. However, Sienna could feel a similarity between the Demon King of Incarceration's suppression and what lay ahead. Could the Demon King of Incarceration be involving himself in this battle? No, it was a long-established fact that magic could not be used in the Salgalta Sea. If the reason why magic couldn't be used here had something to do with the Demon King of Incarceration, that meant the Demon King of Incarceration must have had ties to this sea in the distant past. Sienna's lips twitched and rose into a smirk. How great was this? Not only would she be able to kill Iris, her hated enemy, but she would also be able to test the power of her Eternal Hole against Incarceration's unique ability. In the distance, Iris murmured, "Have they arrived?" Meanwhile, exceptionally strong tides of mana whirled around Sienna like a typhoon. Maze couldn't help but bow his head in awe as he watched Sienna slowly advance forward. "They're here," Iris said with a giggle as she got to her feet. The fleet of demonic beasts began to advance. Only 2 ships on the other side sailed out to meet them. The 2 ships were so small compared to the fleet Iris had created that it looked like the 2 ships would be crushed as soon as the 2 fleets collided. But no, instead it would be her side that would be crushed. Iris smiled as she had this thought. People like them could not be stopped by the size of her fleet or her monsters. On this battlefield, the only one who could block them and drive them to despair was the Demon King herself. The Demon King of Fury stepped out onto the deck. The 103 Dark Elves bent their knees as they bowed to the Demon King. They had all been granted new strength due to Iris' dark power. They all revered Iris, their princess who had ascended to become the new Demon King of Fury. Cepheus slowly walked up to drape a jacket over Iris' shoulders. Carmen looked up at Eugene's back as he stood in the sky. She recalled the words that he had whispered earlier. "I'm going to go and kill that Demon King." In this day and age, who would dare to say something like that with any sincerity? "If we are victorious here today," Carmen began. The pocket watch Carmen was holding in her right hand transformed into a gauntlet. She was wearing Heaven Genocide on her right hand, and the gauntlet of the Demon Dragon was on her left hand. While clenching both fists tightly, Carmen muttered, "The way people talk about the lion hearts will change. It will no longer be Vermouth's lion hearts, but instead Eugene's lion hearts." Eugene smiled wryly as he heard Carmen's words. Sienna, who came flying up from their rear, arrived by Laversia's mast. Hush! The gust of wind that arrived alongside Sienna pushed the Laversia forward even faster. The Laversia accelerated as she dove in between the fleet of demonic beasts. But these ships of rotten flesh didn't move to block Laversia, which had been wrapped in a layer of light. This was because they were following Iris' commands. The fleet of demonic beasts was advancing in search of other prey. So for now, the Laversia was able to sail forward without any fear. But those who dared to shine so brightly in this Devildom, the territory of a Demon King, were the prey that Iris needed to deal with personally. No, not prey, but living sacrifices to be offered as a celebration for the second coming of Fury. Her father had been merciful, yet also loved his family. So Iris wanted to emulate her father's kindness. That was why Iris smiled and told her Dark Elves, "You may have the rest." They were the family who had stayed with her for the past 300 years. These 103 Dark Elves deserved to share in Iris' future glory. So Iris would allow them to partake in the sweet fatty game that would be hunted in the upcoming festivities. Of the humans approaching them in those two ships, there were only a few standout characters. On the flagship was one Carmen Lionheart, whom Iris had briefly encountered in Kiel. And on the following ship was the second-ranked mercenary king Ivik Slad. Could Ordis be staying with the reserves? Iris wondered. How stupid, what's the point of dividing their forces like that? They were all going to die anyway, so they should at least make the most of their futile attempt. Iris giggled as she stalked forward. She casually began floating up into the sky. As Iris flew into the air, she looked down at all that lay below. With a flash, there was a sudden burst of light. Iris' lips twitched slightly. Even as the light pierced through the darkness surrounding her, Iris saw no need to try and avoid it. Because the darkness that appeared wherever her gaze was directed could easily swallow up the light. Even though you've become a Demon King, your actual talent seems to be the same as ever? Eugene commented mockingly. Before Iris had even noticed it, he had appeared in the skies opposite her. "You don't seem any different from when I saw you in Kiel," Eugene observed dismissively. This was a lie. Eugene could sense it from the moment they had come face to face. A dark power so oppressive it felt like he was about to lose consciousness. Even the intimidation that he had felt when facing Rhyzakia couldn't compare to this. It reminded him of 300 years ago, back when he had faced the original Demon Kings. Fwoosh! Behind Eugene's back, the wings of prominence unfurled. This was a harsh environment for magic usage. However, it was still much better than the other side of the Lehane Jar or the Dimensional Rift. And the ring flame formula that was based on the Eternal Hole had allowed him to cast prominence even in those places. Eugene had also reached the 7th star of the white flame formula. Now, even as a joke, Eugene's flames could no longer be described as white. They had transformed into a purple shade that was close to black. Observing Eugene in his current state, Iris giggled. "You don't look much like the hero, child." Iris was saying this sincerely. With that appearance, along with that mana and killing intent, every aspect of Eugene was different from Vermouth. Vermouth, that inhuman bastard, even though she didn't want to admit it, had an appearance that was worthy of his title as the hero. However, even without fighting Eugene, Iris could tell there was a difference between Vermouth and the one currently standing in front of her. Iris was already certain of this, even with what little she could currently sense from him. Even though they were already glowing, A light seemed to flash in Iris' eyes as she recalled one of her many enemies from 300 years ago. Opposite her, Agarotha's ring was vibrating as destruction was drawn from within the folds of Eugene's cloak.